Welcome to MRS Bulletin's Materials News Podcast, providing breakthrough news and interviews with researchers on hot topics in materials research. My name is Sophia Chen. Engineers have generally found it useful to make electronic devices smaller. Make the transistor smaller, and you can cram more of it on a chip and improve performance. Make sensors smaller, on the micron or nanoscale, and you can integrate more functionality into a small device.
The smaller we can make them, the faster they can respond, the more different things we can do, the more we could stick them into your phone and all this kind of stuff.
That's Lane Martin, a materials researcher at Rice University. He's studying a type of material known as Relaxor ferroelectrics. Right now, researchers are interested in integrating Relaxor ferroelectric materials into nanoscale devices.
The problem has been, while we're really good at making these micro and nanoscale devices in general, when we take these materials and shrink them down to those sizes, they don't work like they do when they're big.
Relaxor ferroelectrics are good for sensors because they are extremely responsive to many types of external stimuli. Specifically, its lattice structure changes drastically in response to pressure, temperature, and applied electric fields. This makes them useful, for example, for tiny accelerometers or actuators that could be put in medical devices such as ultrasounds and even microphones and sonar. But researchers have found as they shrunk Relaxor ferroelectric samples down to about a micron, their properties would change.
The problem was, as you shrink these things down, they typically get less good at doing their jobs.
Researchers weren't sure of the physics that caused the material to be less effective. So that's what Martin and his colleagues wanted to understand.
If we do shrink these things down, what are the things we're going to run into? What are the problems? What are the length scales that are really going to limit the fundamental function of these materials? That's what we were trying to understand.
To understand Martin's recent study, let's back up and explain what type of material Relaxor ferroelectrics are.
If you take a relaxor and a ferroelectric and stick them together, you get a Relaxor ferroelectric.
For real. That's what a Relaxor ferroelectric is. It's a combination of a relaxor and a ferroelectric. So what's a ferroelectric? Martin explains it in analogy to a ferromagnet, like the one that sticks to your refrigerator. If you zoom in on that fridge magnet, you'll see little magnetic moments that are aligned with each other. Because the tiny domains are all aligned, they add up to an overall magnetic moment in the whole material. In the ferroelectric, instead of it being made of magnetic moments, they consist of electric charges that form tiny dipoles that all align with each other.
Here we have positive and negatively charged atoms that can slightly displace relative to each other, and they can create a little dipole in this system, right? So there's a north end and a south end, and you can have a little electric dipole at the unit cell level, at the kind of basic Lego building block level of these materials.
Those dipoles add up to create an intrinsic large-scale electric dipole moment in the material. So what's a relaxor? A relaxor is a disordered cousin of the ferroelectric. Within it, some of its electric dipoles are aligned, but only on short length scales around 5 to 10 nanometers. They don't line up in mass to create that large-scale dipole moment like in a ferroelectric. Without an applied field, the dipoles are not all aligned in the same direction. Also, the dipoles in a relaxor are transient and evolve with time and temperature. Now that we've covered the relaxor and the ferroelectric, let's go back to the Relaxor ferroelectric. When you combine the relaxor and the ferroelectric, the configuration of charges in each push and pull against each other. Martin explains.
The ferroelectric is trying to get all those polarizations to line up, right? So it's fighting against that disorder of the relaxor and saying, hey, let's make a little ordered packet of stuff inside of here. And that gives you this kind of material that's sitting right at the cusp of where it wants to be disordered and where it wants to be ordered. And then when you poke it, big changes can happen inside of this material.
This culminates in tiny nanometer scale domains of aligned dipoles.
They're kind of like long ellipsoid shapes.
The ellipsoids are around 5 to 10 nanometers along their short axis and 20 to 30 nanometers along their long axis. The material they studied was an alloy called lead magnesium niobate lead titanate.
The way we would abbreviate it is we would say PMNPT.
They created PMNPT using a technique called pulsed laser deposition, where they fired a UV laser at a target and the resulting material lands on a substrate to form a thin film. Then, they studied the material using several techniques, including scanning transmission electron microscopy and X-ray diffraction. They studied samples of varying thicknesses, from 5 to 55 nanometers thick. They found that as the films became as thin as 25 to 30 nanometers, the ellipsoid-shaped domains would start to become squeezed and rotate. The ellipsoids were about that length across along their long axis.
Right when the film thickness reaches that long axis thickness or length of these materials, then it kind of rolls over and starts to go downhill in terms of its performance.
Martin says that this work is significant because it deepens the field's fundamental understanding of Relaxor ferroelectrics.
Now, the implications of this are for what we can do with it in terms of the future. How small of a device could we make from these materials and still have it function and behave the way we want it to? Are there thickness regimes that we should focus on to get the best properties out of these materials?
In future work, Martin plans to use the same fabrication techniques to build up heterostructures of this material along with others to create thin films with desired properties. This work was published in a recent issue of Nature Nanotechnology. My name is Sophia Chen from the Materials Research Society. For more news, log on to the MRS Bulletin website at mrsbulletin.org and follow us on X at MRS Bulletin. Don't miss the next episode of MRS Bulletin Materials News. Subscribe now. Thank you for listening.